Iron Sharpens Iron. It's all about this small town in Louisiana called Ironton. And it's built near all these oil reserves and petrol reserves. And there's this constant struggle with these petrol and oil companies wanting to use more of the land for industrial use. And the big controversy that is discussed in this documentary is about them starting a project that was actually on a slave burial ground and then hiding it from the town, all in the purposes of consumerism. So you have this historically Black town, which is historically all Black, under the thumb of the segregationist government leaders historically. And you see this intense sense of pride and want to take a stand for their home within the community leaders and within just the people living there, growing up there. I loved how the documentary showcased the different residents and how they felt, and it gave that little bit of history, but also gave, insight into the political struggles that is going on right now. It also lets you know how this space is affected by natural disasters, and just in general, you're seeing this juxtaposition between areas that are predominantly Black, and how sometimes local legislation or government will disregard these communities and utilize them for profit, as opposed to having actual respect for the residents living there. And then even the residents that die there, to have that many remains of a plantation, to have tried to hide that, all in the sake of continuing the building, just is very concerning. And so it was good to see that you had this district leader who really took his job seriously and wanting to make sure that the residents are heavily involved and tangibly able to understand what's going on in their home, because at the end of the day, it is their home. And the people coming in and building and making money off of this place is not a place they have to live. My concern leaving this is, how do all these petrol and oil refineries affect the people living there? I'm assuming that there's some sort of cancer risk, and the reason why these are placed in certain neighborhoods and not in others is all because there is a lower value placed on Black lives, and it has always been and it still is. And I think that's the most upsetting part of this, is just, you can say whatever you want, but the proof is right there in the pudding.
Iron Sharpens Iron it focuses on very interesting but also important topics, such as history, ancestry, and environment, and just that kind of disconnect when it comes towards the people and corporations. Because the whole focus of this documentary is the fact that this company is trying to build an oil transport location on an ancestral burial ground for former slaves. And you can see from the documentary there's this kind of disconnect when the residents talk about it versus when the corporation talks about it. Corporation can't see what the problem is, why there's such an uproar against building it here, kind of in a sense of, for them it feels like they're kind of just washing the problems away. Like, building over this will make people forget about the problem. But that in and of itself is the problem. People don't want to forget. They want to always have that sense to remember their ancestors. And then there was also the risk of building it in this area, which is a primarily minority-centered area, is it could have had negative health consequences. And then the argument is, why build it specifically here? Why can't we build it somewhere else further away? And so there's a lot of questions involved, like, was the demographics involved? Would it have been quote unquote financially safer to build it in this area because it's seen as financially lesser. You know, all of these different factors are put into play where it really forces the question of what was the true motive. Um, and then there's the added factor of Hurricane Ida, which unfortunately caused a lot of irreparable damage. Um, and it brings the whole message full circle because unfortunately there was a lot of damage to the graveyards and a lot of the things that they wanted to remember were damaged in the hurricane. And it was all very unfortunate. The one light is that the project was canceled, but now with the third factor of nature itself, that's a new question. What can we do to preserve what we cherish? This documentary definitely made me think of a lot of very important factors, and I think it was a very important message.
Iron Shapes Iron is not a surprising story, but nevertheless an extremely disappointing and disheartening story of the little value that is placed on low-income Black communities and the absolute disrespect that is placed on them for existing, for wanting to respect their ancestors and the very important history that they hold. You know, obviously they're sitting on these big oil reserves. That is, they're sitting on a lot of money. And these oil companies want to come in and use that land. But it's just like inconceivable to build on a burial ground. And these companies have no issue doing it. And not only that, they know what they're doing and they know how wrong it is, and therefore they actively tried to cover it up. And it's just so important to have community members who care about the people and really have a vested interest in protecting the community that they call home, but also has such a storied past. And you know, I just love the way that the one gentleman just really stood up for his people, in particular when they were going to survey the land. He was like, why haven't you cut the grass? How are we supposed to survey it if we can't see it? You know that we have people coming out. And the guy was like, And just, you know, he really just, he was there for his people, 100%. He wasn't worried about making anyone else uncomfortable. He stood his ground. He said, we're going to leave. We're not comfortable. Fix this, and then we'll come back. And it was just like, I was like, yes, tell them, because they are actively trying to tread on your land. So I think that pieces like this are so important because they're very current. They are happening actively all the time. These companies are relentless, and they may have won the fight this time, but it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be more people, more companies knocking down their door in the future and trying more things. Like whatever they can get away with, they will. And so it's important to stay on top of that and stay diligent. And this is what this community has done, and they did an incredible job. But, you know, the battle is won, but the war isn't over, kind of thing. And as long as they have these lucrative lands available to them, people are going to keep coming and trying. So, really, really fascinating piece, really well done, very informative, and I think does a great job of educating people on what types of things are happening in these small communities that we don't necessarily hear about. So I loved this. Great job.
Iron Sharpens Iron. This had a great opener. It let you know exactly what was going on along the Mississippi down in Louisiana and prepared you for what the film was about. I think that they did a terrific job in getting their point across. I loved all of the cinematography, and I especially loved the interviews. It was really gut-wrenching at times listening to everything that these Black communities are going through in Louisiana. And it's disgusting that at this day and age, we have this kind of racism still in this country, as well as the corporate greed that's happening. It really shone a spotlight on those things, and it educated me about so much of what is happening down there and what the struggle is still for Black people in America. So thank you so much for making this film, and it really did, it touched my heart.
In Sharpens Iron. So I liked the implementation of animation in this documentary. I always say that animation in documentary is a great use to sort of enhance the narrative, and it allows you to play more and explore more as well as explain more, which is what they did in this documentary. It helped you sort of better understand the scale of the issues that they're trying to address and what the effects look like, and just for people who aren't particularly savvy in this subject, I think it really helps to do that. So I think that was a great choice. I'm always for animation. I also liked how they sort of focused on a specific neighborhood to address these sort of issues, and then from that, other sort of socio-political issues come up, and that need to be addressed. So I liked that it sort of started wider and then it went sort of more specific, and we sort of see these sort of subtopics coming from that.
I feel for the people of Ironton, Louisiana, what they're going through time after time with a government who clearly doesn't care is completely heartbreaking. Whoever was the genius that decided to build and develop on burial grounds is truly a heartless individual. Yes, it's a person who doesn't mind being haunted, or the community not to, but you don't disturb those who have been laid to rest. This documentary, I hope it gets to the people it needs to. That way things get improved in this community. Because it sounds like they've been trying for several generations and the government just constantly ignores them time and time again. So hopefully this does eventually get to the audience it needs to, and to the people it needs to, so it can improve. So that their lives can improve. They shouldn't be the last on the docket to be rebuilt, to have help when hurricanes hit. They happen quite frequently in Louisiana, so they should be treated like everybody else when it happens. These people in this community, where things continue to get rebuilt, and the government cares just as much for them as they do everybody else. But since they are next to, I think they said, an oil rig, they some type of mass company next to the enslaved burial ground. It says it produces more cancer, probably not a lot of fresh water. Regulations need to be put in place so that people can have a good, clean life and live the way they want to. This documentary raises awareness to many different issues going on in this community, and it should be given to an audience that can force their local government to move in order to help them.